Secretary of State for Transport, Heidi Alexander.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Today, this government is giving British car makers certainty and support on the transition to electric vehicles as we set out plans to back industry in the face of global economic headwinds. We've worked in close partnership and at pace with colleagues in the Scottish Government, Welsh Government and Northern Ireland Executive, whom I would like to thank. The automotive industry is a cornerstone of our economy. It supports over 150,000 jobs and generates £19 billion every year. Today, with government backing, it must negotiate the turbulence of fresh global economic challenges. For too long, this sector has been held back by a lack of long-term certainty. That changes now. This is a government that listens and acts. We've listened to car manufacturers, large and small, from Sunderland to Solihull, Crewe to Coventry. We've heard what car makers told us they needed, not just to survive, but to thrive. What they want is what we're delivering. Practical, sensible reforms that will unlock investment, protect jobs, and strengthen Britain's leadership in the zero emissions transition. Mr Speaker, I can today confirm that the government is maintaining our manifesto commitment to phase out the sale of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030. I can also reconfirm our commitment to all new cars and vans being 100% zero emission by 2035, with no changes to the existing trajectory for the transition set out in the ZEV mandate regulation. We are supporting the role of hybrid vehicles as a crucial stepping stone in that journey, with new full hybrids and plug-in hybrids on sale until 2035. This strikes the right balance, firm on our climate commitments, but flexible in how we meet them. Because our aim is not to impose change for its own sake, but to enable industry to make the transition in a way that matches supply with demand, supporting businesses and the jobs they provide every step of the way. So we are significantly increasing the flexibility within the ZEV mandate. Manufacturers will have more freedom in how they meet targets, including the ability to sell more EVs towards the end of this decade, when demand is projected to be higher. We are also extending the ability to borrow and repay credits through to 2030, and to earn credits for cleaning up their non-ZEV fleet all the way out to 2029, ensuring companies can manage their own pathways more effectively. This recognises the real-world challenges British businesses face, and it gives them the smoothest possible road to run on. We are also reducing fines for missing ZEV targets from £15,000 to £12,000 per vehicle. And where fines are levied, which for the vast majority of manufacturers will not be the case, the revenue will be recycled directly back into support for the sector. Because this is a government that invests in solutions, not punishes ambition. And let me be clear, Mr Speaker, this is not a retreat from our ambitions on EVs, quite the opposite. It is right that the threat of fines remain, as it is an inescapable fact that the domestic transport sector remains the UK's single largest carbon emitter, accounting for 30% of emissions in 2024. That's why we are doubling down on our commitment to the electric transition, with more than £2.3 billion available to support industry and consumers. That includes funding for new battery factories, EV supply chains, charging infrastructure and grants for zero-emission vehicles. Mr Speaker, the public are already leading the way. March saw a 43% increase in electric vehicle sales compared to the same month last year. February was a record month too, with EVs accounting for 1 in 4 new car sales. The surge in demand shows we are moving in the right direction, but it also shows the importance of maintaining momentum. So we will continue working with industry to ensure demand keeps pace with supply, building a sustainable market for the long term. And the infrastructure is growing too, with over 75,000 public charge points now available and more than £6 billion of private investment lined up for the UK charge point rollout by 2030. Today, Mr Speaker, a new charge point is installed every 29 minutes. That's over 50 every day. Families charging at home can now save up to £1,000 a year compared to petrol drivers. An EV charged at home overnight can run for as little as 2p a mile. That's putting money in people's pockets whilst relieving pressure on the planet. And Mr Speaker, we know that one size does not fit all. That's why small and micro manufacturers will be exempt from these new measures. It's why vans will have 5 extra years to go green, because we recognise their unique role in the economy and giving businesses the time they need to adapt. And it's why we are making space for hybrid vehicles in the mix, not as a compromise, but as a contribution. Hybrids offer lower emissions today without requiring overnight shifts in driving behaviour or infrastructure. They build public confidence, support choice, and ensure no one is left behind in the transition. Mr Speaker, this is not just a transport policy, an environmental policy or an economic policy. It is a part of this government's plan for change, a long-term effort to deliver clean, sustainable, high-quality growth, creating new jobs in battery production, EV supply chains and infrastructure, anchoring manufacturing here in the UK and supporting skilled apprenticeships in clean tech and advanced engineering. With today's announcement, British names like Rolls-Royce, Land Rover and Vauxhall will now have the certainty they need to plan, invest and lead. We are backing British businesses to succeed at home and abroad. These are reforms that are fair to manufacturers, reasonable for workers and right for the climate challenge ahead. Now, I know some might retreat to tired arguments about a war on motorists, but this government is focused on real challenges, not imaginary grievances. Most of us are motorists, most of us are passengers. We are all in this together. What we need is not division, but direction. And that's what we're delivering today, by listening to industry, following the data, and building a strategy grounded in evidence and ambition. Because when we came into government, Mr Speaker, we promised to prioritise one thing above all else: growth. Growth for industry, growth for clean transport, growth for people, places and pay packets. With these bold, practical reforms backed by the Prime Minister's plan for change, this is exactly what we are delivering. I commend this statement to the House.
I think on his birthday we should take the Shadow Secretary of State, Gareth Bacon.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Mr Speaker. I'm not going to embarrass myself by announcing how old I am, but it's far too old. You've just checked. Mr Speaker, I would like to thank the... That's a very helpful intervention from the honourable gentleman, and he is, of course, completely right. I would like to thank the Secretary of State for her statement and for advanced sight of it. Mr Speaker, the announcement by the United States of America that 25% tariffs will be imposed on the UK automotive exports has understandably caused significant concern within the automotive sector. Automotive manufacturers now face tariffs of 25% on around £8 billion worth of cars and auto parts exports. And these tariffs constitute a potentially devastating blow for the automotive industry. And I would therefore like to assure the Secretary of State that we will support the government when they do sensible things to reverse the impact on our already fragile economy. And in that vein, I am glad that they have recommitted to negotiating a better deal with our closest ally and largest single country trading partner, and do sincerely hope that they are successful in their negotiations. However, with respect to the substance of the Right Honourable Lady's statement, I must admit that I cannot share her enthusiasm for the rest of Labour's plans. Because the reality is that today, Labour is simply trying to clear up the uncertainty they themselves have contributed to. When the previous Conservative government reacted to sluggish automotive trade figures and made pragmatic decision to delay the ban on new diesel and petrol cars from 2030 to 2035, aligning the UK with major global economies such as France, Germany, Sweden and Canada, Labour accused us of undermining the automotive industry. This morning, the Secretary of State criticised the previous government for, and I quote, chopping and changing, and a consultation put out by Labour claimed that our policies caused great harm to the UK's reputation as a leading nation in the EV transition by moving the goalposts. But that is precisely what they did upon taking office by ideologically reversing the 2035 deadline. The plans announced over the weekend do not place the automotive sector in a better position than it was when we left office, despite some minor adjustments to the zero-emission vehicle mandate. What's more, this announcement will not undo the damage this Labour government has already caused. The Labour government's introduction of a £25 billion national insurance jobs tax at their first budget was a major blow to businesses. We've warned for months that this would harm industries, and the automotive sector is no exception. The Secretary of State will know that US tariffs on UK car exports are set to cost the automotive sector £1.9 billion. Wow. And combined with the government's jobs tax, which is predicted by the OBR to put 50,000 jobs at risk, it is likely to cost the automotive sector an additional £200 million. This double whammy is going to be very difficult for the automotive sector to absorb. Indeed, despite today's announcements, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders have stated that zero-emission vehicles mandates targets remain incredibly challenging. In their words, and I quote, "The ZEV mandate targets are incredibly challenging, especially with a paucity of consumer demand and geopolitical upheaval. Growing EV demand to the levels needed still requires equally bold fiscal incentives to give motorists full confidence to switch." But that is not what the government is offering. Instead of the bold changes the Prime Minister boasted of at the weekend, what we have is mere tinkering at the edges. Allowing producers of luxury vehicles such as Aston Martin and McLaren to be exempt from the 2030 ban on the sale of new internal combustion engine vehicles is welcome, as is the news that all forms of hybrid cars will be available until 2035. But this does not go anything like far enough. In the case of hybrid company cars, the government is still proposing to increase the level of tax liability on the value of those cars by as much as 16%, which could potentially cost individual drivers thousands of pounds each. The reduction in fines for missing sales targets of EVs from £15,000 to £12,000 per vehicle is nothing to be celebrated. It's like drowning, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the depth of 100 metres instead of 120. Over the past few months, we've heard from numerous businesses saying they simply cannot cope with the ZEV mandate. In October, the CEO of Jaguar Land Rover warned that it was causing severe disruption to the new car market. Not long after, Vauxhall announced the closure of its Luton factory, citing the ZEV mandate as a key factor in making the plant economically unviable. And more recently, uncertainty has surrounded Plant Oxford, the home of the Mini since 1959. Madam Deputy Speaker, last year, when excluding fleet sales, the fact is that only 10% of private purchases of new vehicles were electric. Far from doing them a favour, the government to offer to fine retailers a small amount less for failing to sell a product that consumers demonstrably do not want is a kick in the teeth to the automotive industry. I must therefore ask the Secretary of State, with just 1 in 10 private buyers purchasing an electric vehicle in 2024, why is the government still trying to force people to buy something that there is at present limited consumer demand for? Does she really pretend that a single one of the measures announced today were not already in train before the tariffs were announced? Will she commit to reversing the hike in hybrid company car tax? Does she really think that reducing the fine for each car that fails to comply with EV quotas will be enough to mitigate the impact of tariffs? Does she not believe that rather than chasing an arbitrary timeline, now is the time for a more gradual transition to electric vehicles, to allow the sector to mitigate many of the challenges it is currently facing? And finally, will she recognise that the combined impact of the ZEV mandate, the jobs tax and external tariffs is creating a perfect storm for the automotive sector, which is facing significant and exacerbated challenges because of the choices of her party made in the past 9 months?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I extend my birthday wishes to the honourable gentleman as well. I hope he is grateful for the 2 birthday presents that I've given him, not only a statement today but also a general debate so that we can face each other over the dispatch box, not once but twice. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's rich coming from him for him to blame uncertainty on the automotive sector on this government, and I can only think that he has some sort of selective amnesia case going on, because it was his government that introduced this policy. They then delayed the phase-out date, tanking EV demand by 15%, almost overnight. We had the spectacle of the previous Prime Minister, the Honourable Gentleman for North Yorkshire, standing up, making a speech, pushing that date back out to 2035, and almost overnight you saw those sales tax. I think he should be explaining to Britain's car manufacturers why his party faffed about so much, costing them millions, and arguably left the sector less resilient to the global economic headwinds they now face. He claims that this is a moment when we are tinkering at the edges, and nothing could be further from the truth. This is a significant moment for industry. He quotes the SMMT, and I would just gently say to him that Mike Hawes, the Chief Executive at SMMT, said this morning, the government has rightly listened to industry, responded quickly to global dynamics, and recognised the intense pressure manufacturers are under. He is also right to raise the issue of Jaguar Land Rover, who are affected by the imposition of the global tariffs that President Trump announced recently. And I would point out to him that Adrian Mardell, CEO at JLR, has said the following about our announcement today. We welcome the increased flexibilities in the zero-emission vehicle mandate and a clear commitment from government to incentivise electric vehicle uptake and invest in infrastructure. He also says that consumers do not want to buy electric vehicles. I think he needs to go and do his homework. The UK is the 3rd largest market for electric vehicles in the world after the US and China. It is the largest market in Europe. Last year, he can chunter as much as he wants. Last year, 382,000 EVs were sold. We have had record figures in both February and March of this year, where we have seen demand for EVs go up by over 40% compared to the previous month in the previous year. He claims that we were going to do this anyway. Well, he's right that we've been talking to industry for a number of months, and we were always going to have to do something to clear up the dog's breakfast of a policy left by his government. Clearly, the announcement last week about US tariffs on the car industry has made it all the more important that we have acted with pace and urgency. And it's completely right that we have provided the certainty, the clarity for the sector which they have been calling out for years. He claims that this isn't going far enough. We're investing £2 billion in an automotive transformation fund, which will ensure we can build the battery gigafactories of the future, support the EV supply chain, ensuring that those high-skilled jobs of the future are available in communities across the country. We're spending £200 million on supporting the rollout of charge points, backed by £6 billion of private investment between now and 2030. And we're spending £120 million on plug-in vehicle grants, giving people that are wanting to purchase a new van up to £2,500, a larger van up to £5,000. So I say to the honourable gentleman, this government is acting where his government failed. We're giving certainty to businesses, we're protecting jobs in a critical industry, cutting carbon and fostering a competitive market to benefit consumers.
Catherine Atkinson.
Today's news on support for our automotive industry in the move towards electric vehicles will be welcomed by my constituents, including those who work for the nearby Toyota plant at Bernaston. Will the Minister continue this really encouraging level of engagement and responsiveness to industry concerns? And to make sure the transition is a success, can she confirm that this government's wider industrial strategy will further back British auto manufacturers?
State.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and I know my colleague, the Minister for the Future of Roads, has visited the Bernaston plant in her constituency, and I understand what a critical employer it is locally. Of course, Toyota will benefit from many of the changes that we have announced today. The fact that we are allowing the sale of both full hybrids, the Toyota Prius, for example, as well as plug-in hybrids, after 2030. They will also benefit from the extension and expansion of the CO2 transfer caps, and they will, of course, if they are ever in a position where they need to be paying fines, would benefit from a lower level of fines as well, and we would, of course, be reinvesting that money in supporting the sector. So I can give her the assurance that she and her constituents want, that we will continue to support this vitally important sector.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for her statement and advance sight of it? Can I also congratulate the Shadow Secretary on his birthday, and to spare his blushes, note he's much younger than the Lib Dem spokesperson. It is clear the government must take urgent steps to support the car industry to make the switch to electric vehicles. Though increasing flexibility in the mandate is welcome, voices from across the industry have made clear we also need to bolster demand by lowering the barriers for individuals and businesses to purchase EVs. As she knows, there's a recent surge in demand she references as a result of significant discounting to promote sales. In addition to improving the charging network, it's crucial we end the inequality between public and private charging by ensuring the VAT charged by public chargers is in line with home charging at 5% rather than 20%. Not only is it damaging demand, it is also wrong to penalise those who do not have access to private charging. Ministers should also postpone the increase in vehicle tax on electric cars and explore reintroducing the plug-in car grant. As the Secretary of State made clear on the media round this morning, the spectre of Trump's tariffs also loom large over the industry. If the government is serious about protecting car manufacturing in the UK, the Prime Minister must continue to work with our allies in Europe and around the world on coordinated response. The only way to tackle Trump is by negotiating from a position of strength and showing the UK is not alone and will not be bullied. So can I ask the Secretary of State three things? One, what conversations she has had with the Chancellor about lowering the rate of public charging to 5%, and what other measures the government is considering to strengthen EV demand. Can the Secretary of State confirm the measures announced today are a response to the ZEV consultation that ended in February, and what, if any, additional measures are being considered in respect of the tariffs that have since been announced? And thirdly, will the government start negotiations with the EU about the formation of a UK-EU customs union to cut red tape, not only for vehicle manufacturers, but all UK industry?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I can assure the honourable gentleman that the government does keep the VAT variation between public and private charging under review. The 20% standard rate that public charge points are subject to applies to most goods and services with very few exemptions. One of the things that we are doing to try and give individuals low-cost and affordable options for public charging is that we're investing £380 million to roll out overnight chargers. which are cheaper and will be installed to help those without a driveway charge overnight. Just today, Brighton Council has confirmed that it's signed the contracts to deliver 6,000 of these chargers, and comes after Midlands Connect announced in February it was rolling out over 16,000 of these overnight chargers across the Midlands, helping drivers charge for less. He asked me whether this response today is in response to the consultation that we have been running. We launched that consultation at the end of December rather, and it closed in February, and this is the government response to that consultation. With regard to the discussions that we will have with European colleagues, we will continue those discussions, although I'm afraid he tempts me into giving him a commitment to rejoining a EU customs union, and that is not a commitment I can make.
Esterson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my honourable friend for the stability and confidence that she's given to our automotive industry on behalf of those of my constituents who work at JLR at Halewood. It will be enormously reassuring to them. The last government confirmed through Mark Harper, the then Secretary of State, that it was already cheaper for drivers to switch to electric vehicles. He did so from that dispatch box this time last year. And for those of us who are able to plug in at home, that is true up to the tune of £1,000, as she said in her statement, per family. But can I encourage her to work with the Energy Secretary on reducing the cost of electricity more widely to help those of us who can't plug in at home to benefit and improve the consumer demand so crucial to supporting our manufacturers?
I can assure him that I will continue to work across government with colleagues in the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero and in the Department for Business and Trade in order to make the take-up of EVs as affordable as possible to individuals who are wanting to make that transition. He's entirely right to point out that drivers can save up to £1,000 a year if they mostly charge at home compared to a petrol car, and that you can run an EV for as little as 2p per mile if charging at home. I would also just point out, Madam Deputy Speaker, that half of used electric cars are now sold for under £20,000, and there are 29 brand new electric cars on the market for under £30,000.
Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm proud to have Ford's UK technical headquarters employing thousands of high-quality R&D jobs and fantastic workers at Dunton HQ in my Basildon and Billericay constituency. And there are certainly elements of what the Secretary of State has announced today will be very welcome. However, on the flip side, local businesses who are reliant on that, in fact the entire automotive sector, will also be seeing a £200 million a year increase in national insurance kicking in yesterday, and today kicking in for my small businesses in my constituency, many of whom work in London, charges on the Blackwall Tunnel for the first time ever, and on the Silvertown Tunnel as well, which means that many of those small businesses will be facing charges of £35 a day just to operate in London. So would the Minister raise those issues with her colleague, the Mayor of London, and also the Chancellor of the Exchequer? And perhaps she could also answer the question about the plug-in van grant. While it's welcome that a 5-year delay has been put in, could she also answer the question as to how long that plug-in van grant will be extended? We know it's to 26, but how much longer?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I was struggling to decipher a question in the speech that was forthcoming from the other side of the chamber. He asked me to comment on the opening of the Silvertown Tunnel in East London, and I would simply say to him that I suspect a number of his constituents, whether driving for work or to try and reach friends and family, have been stuck in absolutely atrocious traffic north and south of the Blackwall Tunnel. I would also point out, for the first time ever, London's double-deck red buses will now be able to cross the Thames east of Tower Bridge. So I would hope that he might join me in congratulating both the Mayor of London and Transport for London in getting a new river crossing open, which is much needed.
Preet Gill.
Thank Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The news over the weekend that Jaguar Land Rover was pausing shipments to the United States was concerning for many of my constituents, employing 9,000 people at its factory in nearby Solihull and supporting thousands of jobs in the wider supply chain. After the flip-flopping of previous governments, this government has acted decisively to give British car makers certainty and support in the transition to electric vehicles. Can the Minister confirm whether she is planning to build flexibilities into the mandate targets?
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and that is precisely what we have done. And to reassure her that I have been in touch directly with Jaguar Land Rover over the last couple of days, and I'm pleased that the certainty that we are able to provide to them and other car manufacturers at this very, very difficult time. We've been able to do that this week, and I hope it will provide some comfort to her constituents employed at that local facility.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As someone who has never bought a new motor vehicle apart from a motorcycle, may I probe her further about what she said about the second-hand EV market? Does she anticipate, for those families that would never be able to afford a new vehicle, does she anticipate a time when the second-hand EV market will be comparable to the second-hand market in terms of price for conventional vehicles?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. He's right to raise the issue of the second-hand market. 80% of car purchases that happen in any given year are in the second-hand market, and I am told that at the moment one of the most popular products on Auto Trader is second-hand EVs. They're selling very well, and he's completely right to say that these vehicles need to be affordable to everyone and an option for everyone, and so I'm hopeful by those green shoots that we're seeing in the second-hand market at the moment.
Members with lengthy questions are just preventing their colleagues from getting in, so please keep your questions short. Select Committee Member Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her statement and the leadership she's showing in delivering our manifesto commitments in partnership with industry. The contrast with opposition is clear, where they're bringing along uncosted ideas for grants, subsidies and tax cuts. So I welcome the reaffirmation of the plan to roll out EV charging, but is the Minister sure that that will be able to meet EV demand? And also, is there any plans for a battery health check to help reassure people in the second-hand market when it comes to buying used vehicles?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. We are working with the UNECE on the battery health check issue that he raises, and I can assure him that we are working closely with the private sector on the rollout of charge point infrastructure. I said in my statement that a new EV charger is currently installed at a rate of 1 every 29 minutes, 50 a day. I visited the new Instavolt supercharging hub in Winchester only a couple of weeks ago, which really, when you see it, is a glimpse into the future. And so it's imperative that government continues to work with the private sector to make sure that that car charging infrastructure is there for everyone in the places where they need it, when they need it.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the UK, businesses in the automotive supply chain, both across the country and in my constituency of Mid Sussex, need more support, and indeed the SMMT agrees that a package of measures is needed for the supply chain. So what consideration has the Secretary of State given to support the needs of the supply chain specifically? And also, given that she's not inclined to be tempted by my honourable friend the member for Wimbledon's imploring that we should join an EU-UK customs union, what assessment has the department made of the cost of not doing so?
She will be aware that the Cabinet Office lead on the EU reset negotiations, and so it would be a question that she might most appropriately put to my colleagues in the Cabinet Office. With regard to her wider question about support for the EV supply chain, we have announced the Automotive Transformation Fund to a value of £2 billion, and part of that is specifically about supporting the EV supply chain.
Luke Akehurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of my North Durham constituents proudly work at Nissan. In my neighbour my honourable friend, the member for Washington and Gateshead South's constituency, Nissan Sunderland's 6,000 staff make excellent cars, including hybrid and electric vehicles. My right honourable friend deserves credit for putting a package together at pace that has been welcomed by industry. She is right to suggest this is only one piece of the puzzle. What more will she and the government colleagues be looking to do to support the sector in the coming months?
We will continue to roll out that electric charging infrastructure, which is really important to give confidence to consumers. The time to switch is now to EVs. We will continue to have the plug-in vehicle grants for individuals that are thinking about purchasing a new van, and we will continue to keep under review what else could be done to stimulate demand and make sure that we maintain the momentum that we're seeing in the market in the first few months of this year.
Jeremy Wright.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome what I think the Secretary of State has announced in relation to smaller luxury vehicle manufacturers like Aston Martin based in my constituency. I say I think because her statement says that small manufacturers will be exempt from these new measures. I'd just be grateful if she could clarify that that refers to the existing mandate measures, because she knows that's what the smaller manufacturers in question have been lobbying to be exempted from, rather than from the loosenings she's announced today. But if indeed she can confirm that, and she is relying on an argument that you can treat smaller luxury manufacturers differently to everyone else, would she commend that argument to her colleague, the Trade Secretary, in discussion on tariffs with the United States?
Minister.
I can confirm to the honourable gentleman that the smaller and micro manufacturers are exempt from the ZEV mandate, but they will need to comply with the 2035 complete phase-out date as per all other manufacturers.
Toby Perkins.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I hope that the rest of the Shadow Secretary of State's birthday is rather better than the last half hour, because I don't think that his contribution today will age very well at all. These measures that the government are proposing are a sensible compromise. The industry did need certainty. There were real concerns about that, as my colleague from Derby North and many other Derbyshire MPs heard on a recent visit to Toyota. But I think that this measures absolutely do strike the right balance. Can I ask the Secretary of State what she is able to say to those constituents of mine who live either in council flats or in terraced properties where it's very difficult to be able to get charging within their house, about what more we can do to ensure that they aren't faced with a huge price disparity in comparison to those who are able to have charging infrastructure at home?
We did issue some guidance to local authorities before Christmas on cross-pavement solutions, and we are also offering a grant of up to £350 for households with on-street parking. And so I hope those two things together will offer some comfort to his constituents who are in the situations that he describes.
Graham Levyton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I also thank the Secretary of State for the statement and the pace that is understandably needed with this. I do have some concern about pace in that it has to follow due process for the devolved administrations. So can the Secretary of State assure the House that sufficient time is being allowed for the devolved administrations, including the Scottish Government, to be fully involved and engaged in the consultation and policy development, and also the Scottish Parliament, any legislative changes that may be required? And secondly, what assessment has been made of the potential of the proposed changes to negatively impact on carbon emissions in the UK and Scotland, and our respective governments' ability to meet statutory climate change targets? And will the Minister publish any such assessments?
Minister.
I would like to put on record my thanks to the Scottish Government for their assistance in working at pace over the last couple of days. I committed to his colleagues in the Scottish Government to work closely with them, and that's exactly what I have done. With regard to carbon assessments, we have conducted a carbon assessment, and I can assure the honourable gentleman that the changes that we are proposing today make a negligible change to the carbon emissions that were predicted to be saved as a result of the ZEV mandate.
Serena Brackenridge.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Secretary of State's statement given the uncertainty and turmoil caused by US tariffs on British-made vehicles. Can my right honourable friend outline how she is responding to major employers like Jaguar Land Rover to ensure they can remain competitive and safeguard jobs in our local communities, as shared by my honourable friends across this House?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and as I may have said to other colleagues, JLR will stand to benefit from the flexibilities that we have announced today, including the increased borrowing flexibility, the extension and the expansion of the CO2 transfer cap, and the changes that we have talked about in regard to the way in which we measure CO2 emissions from plug-in hybrids, which will make it easier for them to use the CO2 transfer flexibility. And so I think all of those things that we have announced today will be welcomed by JLR, and hopefully her constituency will be employed at the factory.
Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If the government's top priority really is growth, how can a policy which sets artificial targets to ban products that people want to buy that are not subsidised, to force them to buy products that they don't really want which are subsidised and incidentally suffer very high insurance costs and high depreciation costs, and may end up with having to close down capacity to produce those products that people do want to buy in the United Kingdom, to buy cheap Chinese products to be imported from overseas? This doesn't sound like a policy for growth. She may have priorities, but it's not growth.
Minister.
I would suggest to the honourable gentleman that he speaks to his constituents who are buying EVs in numbers. There's been a 40% increase. If you look at the... he's telling me that he's got one, which is fantastic. He's clearly leading the way. This is a massive industrial opportunity for this country. And we need to give certainty and confidence both to businesses and consumers, and that's precisely what this government is doing. And if he wishes to become a poster boy for the EV industry, I'm very happy to have a conversation with him about it.
Colleagues and the Secretary of State must be much swifter. We've got another statement and 2 further debates. So, Annalise Dodds, show us how it's done.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yeah. Workers at BMW Cowley have made clear to me how determined they are to play their part in a jobs-rich transition to net zero. So can my right honourable friend explain how these changes will benefit BMW Cowley specifically, given its significance for my constituency and for UK manufacturing as a whole?
Today we are confirming that we will maintain the existing CO2 scores for plug-in hybrids, not using the revised scores now being used in the EU, and that will be a particular benefit to BMW and the Mini Cowley plant.
Will Foster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Clearly, the car industry will be hardest hit from Trump's tariffs, and my constituency of Woking knows this more than most, because our single largest employer, McLaren, sells 42% of their product to the US. Will the Minister consider retaliatory tariffs, particularly against Tesla, to protect British jobs and show tariffs have consequences?
Minister.
McLaren will, of course, benefit from the small and micro manufacturers exemption that we have announced today. We are considering our position with regard to the imposition of tariffs, and I know that the Business Secretary is currently consulting industry about future steps. All I would say is that an escalating trade war won't be in the best interests of anyone.
Chris Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement today. It's been mentioned previously, but Harlow obviously is a new town and doesn't suffer from, but has a number of properties that don't have off-street parking. So can I ask her to just drill down on the guidance she's given to local councils, what we're going to do, and what local councils do to get more off-street charging facilities?
He's totally right. This is a critical issue, and that guidance that we published before Christmas is vital in this respect, as well as the grant that we give to households.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's not just the absurdity of fining firms for making the wrong cars and insisting it's good for growth. It's that the national grid and local distribution networks don't even have the capacity to cope with growing demand now, let alone if and when cars and central heating are electrified, as the government promises, and all those data centres are built. Can she confirm the connections queue stands at 756 gigawatts, with only 0.54 gigawatts delivered in the last month, while the queue grew by 21.8?
I can assure the honourable gentleman that I'm in regular contact with the Energy Secretary to ensure that the grid connections and capability are there for the EV charging infrastructure that we need.
Speaker. Jaguar Land Rover and their wider supply chain employ huge numbers of people in my constituency, so I'm very glad to see the Prime Minister and the Transport Secretary backing our automotive industry so strongly today. This commitment makes clear our strong climate commitments, but also our support for the transition in the industry. Can the Secretary of State say more about how we're going to support demand-side change to get EV charge points across towns in this country, such as Albury and West Brom in my constituency?
Of course, the Prime Minister is at JLR today in the Midlands. We're spending £200 million of public money on supporting the rollout of EV infrastructure, and that sits alongside £6 billion of private investment to ensure that those charge points are in the places that people need them when they need them.
Jim Shannon.
Deputy Speaker, and thank the Minister for her statement and for her answers as well. Over time, UK governments have committed hundreds of millions of pounds to perfecting electric vehicle charging infrastructure in England. Back home in Northern Ireland, the ratio of charging points to electric vehicles is not sufficient, nowhere similar to what's happening in the mainland, and we are a much more rural community in Northern Ireland. So can the Minister ensure that through the Bennett consequentials, additional attention will be given to ensuring that the devolved institutions have the funding that they need to ensure electric vehicle charging infrastructure can meet the demand of the number of electric vehicles on the road? Thank you.
He raises a fair point about the availability of charge point infrastructure in all places in the UK, and it will be a matter that I look forward to discussing with my counterparts in Northern Ireland when I next have the opportunity to meet with them.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister on behalf of my constituents, many of whom work for Jaguar Land Rover and Aston Martin. It's very welcome news, particularly the changes for small and micro manufacturers, but also for hybrid too, particularly in the light of Washington's tariffs last week. Of course, electrification and hydrogen are the future. You look at China, where their 12 million market, 38% to 50% are now electric vehicles. So can I urge the government to look once again at the support for manufacturers who are subsidising the sale of electric vehicles?
Minister.
The Automotive Transformation Fund, which I mentioned earlier, is a sizable investment that this government committed to at the last budget, and I look forward to speaking with my honourable friend further about his ideas about how this might be best utilised.
Ben Obsujecti.
Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the major issues holding back wider EV ownership is the complete lack of EV charging infrastructure in towns like Huntingdon and St Ives in my constituency. But what assessment has the government made of the grid capacity required to facilitate a significant uplift in EV charging infrastructure? At what point will current grid capacity be unable to provide adequate charging, and how much will that upgrade cost? And separately, what's the plan for a significant increase in EV battery disposal and the prohibitive cost of new batteries for older electric vehicles?
Minister.
These are all matters that my department is constantly reviewing, and with regard to the question about grid capacity, I refer him to the answer I gave earlier to his honourable friend.
Sally Jameson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To make sure the transition is a success, can the Secretary of State confirm that this government's wider industrial strategy will further back British auto manufacturers and British supply chains to make sure that this is a place-based growth agenda for all of our communities?
Minister.
I can confirm that to my honourable friend, and she will know that we will be publishing the industrial strategy soon. This is about creating the jobs of the future in high-skilled industries, and it's about creating the right conditions for growth, and that's completely what this government is committed to doing.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Transport Secretary omitted to mention that UK car production last year was its lowest level for 70 years outside the pandemic, and that actually new registrations this year, UK car production this year is down a further 11%, and the total registrations of electric and hybrid cars this year is down another 2%. So will the Minister actually agree with me? The best thing to do to ensure growth and more production is to scrap all these ridiculous zero-emission targets forthwith.
Minister.
No, I don't agree with the honourable gentleman. The number of new cars sold in the UK last year was 1.9 million and the market grew by 2.6% on 2023. The number of new EVs sold last year was 382,000, which was nearly 20% of the market and represents 21% growth on 2023.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I commend the Secretary of State for standing up for cheaper and cleaner British cars in the face of the global chaos that's being forced onto our economy. And this is particularly in light of the Conservatives' botched Brexit deal, which wrecked Britain's car industry and lost this country a decade of golden British manufacturing. My constituents in Bournemouth East are crying out for charging infrastructure. The Secretary of State said that nobody would be left behind. Can she outline how she'll be investing in charging infrastructure, which makes sure that everybody who wants to be part of the electric vehicle revolution is able to do so?
This is a partnership between public investment and the private sector, and I can assure the honourable gentleman that we will be paying attention to Bournemouth as we will to all other parts of the country.
Vicky Slade.
Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak as a very satisfied second-hand EV driver. I visited OMI's head office last month to learn about how home charging EVs can revolutionise the energy market and help EVs not just become a way of driving, but a way of managing our grid. What consideration has she given to accelerating work on flexible generation and storage to help drive demand for businesses and homes and make Britain be the start of this revolution?
I know this is an issue that officials in my department are looking at very closely, and I'd be interested in talking to her further to learn more about the visit that she made to the business in her constituency.
And Goldsborough.
South Norfolk proudly is the home to Lotus Cars, and this morning I had a conversation with the management team who welcomed the announcement today. One question I would have for the long-term plan that we have for the car manufacturing industry is what action will we be taking for UK-based OEMs to make sure that we have a good plan for the EV transition so we're competitive in the future markets?
Minister.
Everything that this government is doing and everything that is contained within the announcement today is about ensuring that our British businesses are competitive going forward. I'm pleased to hear that Lotus are pleased with the announcement today. Other British brands such as McLaren, Bentley, Caterham, I understand are also pleased with the announcement. And this is all about this government's commitment to driving growth and opportunity.
Mulberry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm concerned about public health. We all know that diesel and petrol hybrids are not zero emission. We know that the 2035 extension isn't about tariffs, it applies only to UK sales. And we know this was already on the cards since Labour ripped Clean Air completely out of its manifesto. Can the Minister tell us whether she's assessed the impact of this on the achievement of clean air target commitments? And is this the last we'll hear of any Clean Air Acts from this government?
Minister.
I can assure the Honourable Lady that an analysis of environmental impacts has been done that relates to both carbon emissions and in relation to the issue of air pollution that she raises.
Harry Jeremy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State is absolutely correct to say that demand for electric vehicles is strong, but in my rural Norfolk constituency, the lack of charging infrastructure over the last 14 years has left many not wanting to make that switch. Can the Secretary of State confirm that rural areas like Norfolk will be prioritised for that charging infrastructure in the future?
In terms of the installation of EV charging infrastructure in rural areas, we have increased that by 45% in the last year, which I hope he and his constituents will start to see the fruits of soon.
Vera Hoghouse.
Madam Deputy Speaker, autonomous vehicles are the next step into the future. Can she let us know what discussion she has with UK manufacturers so that they can take full advantage of the next revolution in how we drive and move around in cars?
We regularly talk to manufacturers and other organisations that are interested in the move to connected and autonomous vehicles. We are open to exploring how that might work in the UK. We need to do it in a safe way, but I am interested in how we might be able to expedite some trials in the UK, and that's a subject that we're working on at the moment.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't know which businesses the Shadow Secretary of State or indeed the Honourable Member for Boston and Scaredness have been listening to, but I've been speaking to businesses including Honda, just outside, whose European headquarters are just outside of my constituency, and they've been saying to me that they are committed to decarbonisation but had concerns over the inflexibility of the scheme we inherited from the party opposite. So given the Secretary of State's statement today, will she agree that this shows that Labour is the party on side of the British car industries and car industry across the world?
He's entirely right. We are backing British business. We are supporting our domestic car manufacturing industry. And I'm pleased to hear that the companies based in his constituency will be welcoming this announcement today.
Roberts.
Previous Labour and Conservative governments did little when Welsh livelihoods were swept away by global market forces in places like the Ford plant in Bridgend and steelworks in Port Talbot. Wales's car sector is facing 25% tariffs thanks to President Trump. That threatens an industry which employs 30,000 people. The Welsh Automotive Forum has said the government's commitments are not enough. They're calling for direct support. Recycled fines are hardly direct support. Is our government prepared to step up and provide it?
Minister. We have a £2 billion automotive transformation fund. We're investing hundreds of millions of pounds in other forms of support as well. I work closely with the Welsh Government on these issues, and we won't leave any stone unturned in our attempts to protect the car manufacturing industry and ensure that those high-skilled jobs are there in communities in Wales and across the rest of the country.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Leeds South Western Morley needs charging infrastructure, and that's why I'm grateful for the Secretary of State's statement today and her answers to my colleagues across this House. Leeds South Western Morley has many residents living in terraced houses without driveways, and some of whom have been in contact with me asking what do they need to do to get the charging infrastructure required to get an electric vehicle. I promised one such resident that I'd raise it with the Secretary of State, so what update can she give on our commitment to charging infrastructure across the UK?
Minister.
Well, I congratulate my honourable friend on fulfilling his promise to his constituent. We are working very closely with local authorities through the Levi scheme to roll out charging infrastructure, and we also issued that guidance I mentioned earlier in my statement to local authorities about improving the cross-pavement charging solutions, and there are also grants available for householders who don't have the driveway but do wish to install a charge point.
Serving the best law, Samuels.
The statement today is further evidence of the economically damaging and market distorting impact of the unrealistic net zero policies. The only reason why the Minister is having to impose fines on producers is because demand does not meet the targets which she has set for the production of electric vehicles. And does she not accept that the only response for producers will either be to cut back production, reducing jobs, or reduce the price of EVs, reducing profits and investment in the UK? And are we going to find that car workers are now the next group of workers to be sacrificed on the altar of net zero?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's right that we retain the threat of fines, but I would just gently point out to the honourable gentleman that we don't believe that in the first year of the operation of the ZEV mandate that any manufacturers will have to pay fines. The trading window in terms of credits is yet to close and will close later this year, but our initial analysis suggests that no manufacturers will have to pay fines this year.
That is the end of the zero-emission vehicle mandate. I'll give the front bench a few moments to swap over so ministers can take their seats.